Susie Kahlich is the woman behind Pretty Deadly Self-Defense, a user-friendly self-defense system, and she joins us here in our studio to discuss this workshop that she's currently giving here in Paris. Susie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just start off with one basic question. Why do women need self-defense courses? Or do they even need it?
I feel that they do. I'm a little biased, of course. Yeah, I think women do need self-defense courses. And I think the reason why is because we are, we're very vulnerable. Women have a higher rate of violence and physical transgressions against us than men in general. And I think women often don't feel that we have a right to defend ourselves. We don't grow up like little boys fighting each other. We don't grow up with the same sense of occupying space. And I think learning a little bit of self-defense helps us understand what options we have in our bodies and our own right to occupy space, which kind of gives us, it gives us more confidence and the ability to do more stuff in life, I think.
And how long have you been giving classes, just as a side note?
I started 10 years ago. So I created the program 10 years ago and was giving courses and workshops kind of part-time. And then 3 years ago, I started doing it full-time.
And from your experience, are there any misunderstandings or misconceptions about women and self-defense training?
Yes, there's a ton. I could go on forever. One of the biggest ones is that people tend to think that self-defense is about fighting back. So a lot of women are reluctant to learn self-defense because they think I'm not violent and I'm not strong and I don't want to hurt anybody, which are all really valid things. I don't want to hurt anybody either, and I'm not strong or violent either. But self-defense isn't about fighting back. It's about defending yourself. And really, it's the physical self-defense is when a physical transgression has been made. So if somebody's touching or grabbing, that's when we need to know how to learn to make some space so we can get away to safety.
So what can you tell me about the type of self-defense that you do teach?
The self-defense that I teach, the program that I created, is based on the martial art that I've been studying for about 20 years now, called ninjutsu. It's a Japanese martial art. It was created for combat, and of course defense. So there's no tournaments or competitions, which means that you can get pretty creative with it. It's based really within the body, based on natural body movements. And I've taken the Japanese techniques, the ninjutsu techniques, and then kind of translated them to everyday movements so that it's a little bit more accessible and easier for people to learn.
So I understand that when you learned this type of martial arts, as you said, it was taijutsu?
Ninjutsu.
Ninjutsu.
But taijutsu is actually a part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you did study with a trainer or a master for 8 years. And I'm wondering, it took you 8 years to really understand and develop the know-how to master that. But can you actually give that knowledge to your students in a couple workshops, in a couple months even? Is that what can they pick up from you in that short amount of time?
When I was training with my teacher in Los Angeles, I mean, yes, it was 8 years, and I was there 5 days a week. So I had a pretty thorough knowledge. But when I left him and I left that dojo, I also left with like some sort of essential things that I felt not only made me feel more confident and secure in a self-defense perspective, but also just in life. So the program that I created kind of boils down the essence of the most important lessons I learned in martial arts and present them in a way for people to learn quickly. Yes, I think people can learn this stuff actually really quickly, especially when we relate it to movements you already do. So you don't feel like, oh, I have to train for 8 years. It's things you've been doing your whole life and not thinking about it. So we're taking everyday moves, tweaking them a little bit, and then applying them to self-defense situations.
And you have taken that way of teaching it and applied it specifically to women, refugee women. I think that was since 2010, if I'm not mistaken.
Since 2016, actually,
Okay,
is when
sorry.
I first started working with refugee women. Yeah.
And why did they? What was the need to particularly target those women as opposed to just your normal classes?
The refugee women, I'd like to sort of change that term. Women living in the refugee centers in Germany and elsewhere, of course, are living in large communal areas. At least when I first moved to Berlin in 2016, that was still the case. When people don't have a lot of private space, people tend to use sort of sexuality as currency. A lot of women were very vulnerable in the sense of they were sort of forced to maybe trade sex for safety, for food, for safe places to sleep, for a safe passage. When people were leaving places like Syria, often a woman, if she was traveling alone with no partner or no male member of her family, would attach herself to a family that had male members present. But then she was also subject to possibly abuse. So in these communities, she was in a lot of ways subject to more frequent abuse than women in daily life might be subjected to. But there's also backlash, because if she's coming from a place like, for example, Afghanistan, where things are a little more, how do you say, I don't want to say old-fashioned, but things are a little more conservative, protecting herself in her own space can often be punished. So she also needs to know how to make space and protect her own body without inviting punishment, sort of covering movements to make them look a little bit more natural, and also to adapt movements to take into account dress. So when people are wearing headscarves, when people are wearing more flowy clothes, things that can get grabbed, the way that you move in those clothes can be different than if you're wearing jeans. So yeah, there wasn't anything really for them.
And were they open to learning this? Because in a way it does put the light on them in a way that they're learning something. People know that they're learning about it. Like you said, it's a communal place, so people know what's going on. Were they reluctant, or was it easy to convince the women?
They were often reluctant at first, but and I think they were reluctant at first, not so much because of learning to defend themselves, but because I think for the same reasons, a lot of women are reluctant in that they kind of believed it wasn't going to work. And also probably believed, like, what does this, very German-looking white lady know about my experience? So once they got into it and we learned a couple of moves that were easy to do and were very effective and addressed situations in daily life, they were really enthusiastic.
So you have tailored the course so that you can wear whatever you want, basically. If you're covered, if you are wearing a flowing skirt, what are some basic, or maybe a basic move that maybe we can see? I don't know if it's possible to demonstrate it here, that perhaps the women have actually like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Maybe I can continue on with that.
A favorite move that we teach is something that all women do and have done since they were little girls, which is put your hair. So we've renamed all our techniques to daily moves. And this one is called put your hair behind your ears. So of course, now my hair is super short, but when we put our hair behind our ears like this, and we've all been doing it since we were little girls, this is also a really powerful elbow strike. We tend to think of elbow strikes as being like a poke, but actually just this movement up, just like this, is a really, really powerful strike. That is enough to make a little bit of space. So we do it, and when we practice it in Pretty Deadly, we literally practice putting our hair behind our ears in front of a pad so that we make contact with it. Okay. So it's a great move.
Okay, so then you teach them something like that, and then how long do they normally take the classes for? How long do you offer the classes for?
My regular classes are 5-week courses. So that each class builds on the class before, so that at the end you wind up with sort of a full complement of tools that you can mix and match, sort of like Legos. When it's for refugee communities, because people are still living in centers or people are living in government housing, it's not the same accessibility. So then it'll be maybe a 4-hour workshop, maybe once a month. Right now I'm working with a bunch of kids through a youth organization through the city of Berlin. And these are so far about 2 times a month, with various kids in various centers all over the place. But with adults, it's usually about once a month.
Okay, and I think we have time for just one last question. I just wanted to know, have you had any testimony of or someone saying, you know what, this is what happened to me, and I put your training into action, and here are the results?
Yes, I get a lot of that, which unfortunately, I mean, I wish that people wouldn't be violated. But I do get really enthusiastic feedback from people saying, guess what happened? I was walking down the street and this guy did this and I used this move and I feel really great. And it's such a great feeling to know that women go through this experience not being traumatized because they're responding in a way that feels empowering and strong. Whereas had they not known anything, oftentimes they feel like I'm helpless and hopeless. So yeah, I do get feedback, and it's great. It's like what I live for.
Susie, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thanks.